There are a lot of things that change with time, but for us, our dedication to helping farmers succeed has never wavered. Some of you have been doing business with us for a long time, while others may be just learning about who we are and what we stand for. Throughout our long history, Beck's has always put innovation and helping farmers succeed at the forefront of our business.
Since the beginning, we've remained focused on helping our farmers succeed. Our unique culture and one-of-a-kind business model have allowed us to grow from a small 80-acre farm to the third largest seed brand in the United States. With a servant's heart, we strive to deliver legendary customer service and a quality line of products.
A lot has happened to get us where we are today, but as one of the fifth-generation family members active in the business, I'm excited to tell you about where we're going. As a grandson, a son, and now a father, I'm proud to help raise the next generation of Beck's leaders and look forward to remaining independent and family-owned for generations to come.
But you might wonder just how once a small, simple farm grew into the largest family-owned corn and soybean seed company in the United States. Since arriving in America in 1833, my family had a tradition of passing on 80 acres of land to each child when they married. But by the time my grandparents, Lawrence and Anna, were married in 1901, that was a family of 8, only 40 acres of our original family land in Tipton County remained. So they decided to sell those 40 acres and use the proceeds to buy 80 acres near Atlanta. The same land where our headquarters remains even today. Then in 1937, Lawrence and Francis leaped at the opportunity when Purdue University Botany Department first offered samples of hybrid parent seed corn to Indiana farmers. They each planted their 3 acres of hybrid seed corn, marking the true beginning of Beck's superior hybrids. And the rest, they say, that's history.
My great-grandfather, Lawrence, passed away a year later, leaving the legacy of the farm in my grandfather, Francis's hands. Dad was born in 1940, marking the third generation of our family to grow up in the business. But it wasn't a thriving business from the start. Over the years, Francis continued to shift from traditional farming to growing more acres of hybrid seed corn to serve the increasing number of customers.
By the 1950s, bags of Beck's seed corn were sold in a handful of counties around Beck's home office in central Indiana. In addition to the Indiana certified hybrids from the Purdue Botany Department, my great-grandpa Francis experimented with developing his own private line of hybrids, using inbreds from selected private seed stock companies. He remained focused on his goal of doing the right thing and doing things right. This belief inspired him to add soybeans and wheat to the product lineup and was the motivation behind Beck's 100% free replant guarantee.
Now, I returned back to the farm in 1964 after graduating from Purdue University and marrying my wife, Glenda. I had a vision for our business and what it could be. And that February, we launched our very first ham and bean supper, which is known today as our annual Practical Farm Research Insight meetings. The following fall, we hosted our first field show. It was also that year that we initiated the start of Beck's Practical Farm Research. Now, as funding for land-grant universities continued to decline, I felt that someone needed to fill the gap and provide unbiased research on agronomic products and practices to generate that data to help farmers succeed. And that's exactly what we've done.
By the 1980s, our company had achieved new levels of growth and production, including expansion in buildings and equipment at our headquarters. Along with growth came new family milestones. My sister Kim, my brother Tony, and I all graduated from Purdue, just like Dad. And in 1987, I officially joined the family business, with Kim and Tony following right behind me. In the early 1990s, I took over our PFR program, and since then, we've seen it grow from a single site to 10 locations where we conduct studies and gather data. Simply put, PFR is the most comprehensive, innovative, and practical agronomic research in the industry to help farmers make decisions that can improve their profitability. There's no other credible source of unique agronomic information readily available to farmers today to help them determine what will increase yields, and more importantly, what will improve their return on their investment.
PFR certainly sets us apart in the industry, but over the years, our company has set a lot of firsts that have allowed us to grow from a small operation to a major player in the agriculture industry. We were the first to market 100% of our seed corn with a seed-applied insect control system called Fast Start. And in 2004, we added SureGrow treatment standard in every bag of soybeans. In 2009, We scored another first by putting together a unique set of yield-enhancing seed treatment products called Escalate, which now comes standard on every bag of corn, soybeans, wheat, and elite alfalfa. We were also the first independent seed company to climb into the top 3 seed sales in the United States. And we are the first family-owned company to sell more than 2 million bags of seed corn in a single year.
We started Beck's Hybrids with 80 acres of farmland here in Atlanta, and we're proud to now serve farmers in over 15 states, across the Midwest and the Mid-South.
As we continue to evolve and lead, you can rest assured that we'll do the risk-taking and hard learning to continue to provide American farmers with the best seed products, research, and the tools that they need to be profitable.
But more importantly, we will remain independent and family-owned, with future generations of the Beck family offering the same high level of service and products that got us where we are today.
Good morning. It's great to see everybody. I'm Scott Beck and got my oldest son, Corey, Beck with me today. We're going to deliver the President's message. And thanks so much for being here. It really means a lot as we launch out into this year where our theme is Unstoppable Together. And I really love this theme because it speaks so much of our history and of the growth that we've experienced working with farmers in an expanding geography over the last 50 years. And we've been the only seed company over the last 15 years to sustain growth in total acres in corn, soybeans, and wheat over that period of time. So thank you for supporting us in such a great way. And I love this unstoppable theme because it also speaks about what we're doing in events like today, where we've invited you to come and where we pull back the curtain, allow you to see some of the practical farm research we're doing, and the other insights that you might be able to take home and take the next step on your farm, where you find something that you want to implement that helps you remain unstoppable as a farming entity. Now, this year's invitation was a little bit different. How many of you remember receiving a box in the mail? And good. And that box, we said, we hope that you leave with a couple of things. And one of those things was at least one idea to propel your operation forward, something that you could use to continue to grow your business. Now, Unstoppable Together is a theme that really goes beyond just us as a company and beyond what you do as individual farmers. It's broader than that. And I love the ag community because we're so well connected in what matters to us and also how resilient we have to be, right? You know, each year we face in different parts of our farming operation or geography, floods, drought, hail, windstorms, market prices. You know, we have to weather through those storms in order to feed billions of people in the world. And in order to do that, I find that personally, when I think about facing challenges, that it's important sometimes to get out of the day-to-day and dig a little bit deeper. Go to a different location, read a book, go somewhere and meet new people, something like you're doing today. Because that's one of the things that helps us to kind of reframe our mindset and our thinking to be able to solve challenges that we weren't able to with our present thinking. Now, as a company, we provide that opportunity. How many of you have been on a customer trip to Caribbean resort location or to the London House there on Grand Cayman Island? Quite a few of you. Okay, so that's an opportunity to get away, to rub shoulders with other farmers and meet new farmers, and maybe some of them have an idea that you could use on your farm. Or read a book by the pool. One of the trips I went on several years ago now, our dealers from northern Indiana, Dee and Kirk Bennett, invited me to go with their customers on a snorkeling trip. And I really appreciated that. It was fun to be with that group. But it reminded me of the very first time that I went snorkeling down in Grand Cayman. And as I put on that mask and went under the surface of the water, I started to see things I'd really never seen before other than in pictures. And to be immersed in that underwater environment where I saw plant life, coral life, other things that I didn't realize the extensiveness of the world below the surface. And what that reminds me of is what we unveiled a year ago in our Root Reveal research. Now, we talk a lot in our product talks about what the plant looks like, the orientation of the leaves, whether they're upright or more droopy, the ear height, the disease resistance, the test weight, all those things that we can see and kind of measure above ground. But as we look at our Root Reveal research, we're uncovering some things that we really didn't realize and still don't totally know the impact of these differences. You know, when you look at our most popular hybrid, the 6374 Double Pro, which is the picture right behind me, compared to a newer product, 5350BR, there's quite a bit of difference in that structure. And I'm going to share just a few of the takeaways of what our research has unveiled to this point. If you want to get more in depth, then come back and hear Jim Swartz. He talks in this same tent about the depth of what we've uncovered and discovered through the Root Reveal research. So one of the key takeaways is that we partner with University of Illinois in a particular population test where we're looking at multiple different genetics at 28,000, 34,000, and 40,000 population. What we discovered is kind of some of the things that you might expect in terms of plant mass above ground. When we increase population, we naturally increase the plant mass above ground. That's what that red line shows. What happens to an individual plant and a root system when we increase that population? You might expect that root size would decrease, right? And that's exactly what we showed. When we measured each individual plant, we went from 16 grams per root down to 11.7 grams per root, just by increasing population. But the overall mass of roots in the ground remained relatively constant. That's the blue line, showing the weight of roots underground. So this was one of the things that we discovered, but what does it mean? Well, if we think about as we increase population, we know we're increasing plant mass above ground, right? So we probably could utilize more nitrogen and maybe more other nutrients. But if that root system is becoming more narrow and smaller, then we probably need to fertilize differently, a more targeted approach to application versus cast. And that's what we discovered. All right, the Root Reveal research really is extensive in that it goes across all of our genetic suppliers. Bayer, Corteva, Syngenta, RAGT, our own breeding program is what we're capturing in this Root Reveal project. And we intend to find out what surface area differences are there. What about the architecture? Some roots are more horizontally oriented, some are more vertically oriented, and some are more of a balanced type of architecture. And then finally, the mass. It's a weight calculation of the total amount of root weight. And we intend to take that information, test it with our PFR proven practices, and then have recommendations that we can make for you, for your specific farms, based on the specific hybrid you're planting, the type of not only above ground descriptions, but what's happening below ground that can help you return more on each hybrid that you plant by understanding how to manage that product based on the root structure, the root architecture, surface area, and so forth. Well, we're also doing and discovering more about soybean roots. And we're not quite as deep into that, so I don't have anything to share with you today, but I do have something that we want to talk about in terms of regulatory and soybeans. And so, Corey, why don't you take it from here?
Thank you. A quick show of hands. Who in the room planted Enlist soybeans this spring? Who planted XtendFlex soybeans? Okay, so several hands in both trait platforms. You know, at Beck's, we've got an industry-leading lineup of high-performing varieties, genetically diverse varieties, so it really doesn't matter to us which soybean technology you choose. Ultimately, what matters to us is that you actually choose. And it's that ability for a grower to make a choice of what the right variety is, the right technology is for their operation, that's really being called into question and threatened by the current regulatory environment. So what you see here on the screen now, this is a map of our marketing area, and the darker the red, the more XtendFlex soybeans that we're selling in that particular county. The counties that are shaded dark green, that's where we're selling predominantly Enlist counties. And so if you think back to the spring and the vacatur of the dicamba label that occurred, you can tell that that uncertainty that caused is going to have significantly more impact in the western part of our growing area and the south compared to the east. And so you think about that dicamba label, it's important to note that really that decision to vacate the label had nothing to do with XtendFlex technology at all. And it also really didn't have anything to do with the effectiveness or the efficacy of dicamba. That label was vacated because of a mistake in a comment period through the approval process. And so what that demonstrates is these environmental groups, they're targeting any small window that they can find in order to strip growers of the ability to choose and to maintain access to the tools and the technologies that they need. So I did my undergrad at Purdue, and I took a business law class, Management 455, taught by Dr. Gothard. And he would start most classes with a statement. He'd walk in and he'd say, "Good morning, this is America, sue everybody." And he, unfortunately, he really wasn't kidding. That's kind of the state of our regulatory environment today, is the incentive to litigate and sue has never been higher than it is right now. And so it's not simply dicamba that's being threatened. The EPA, they've faced challenges related to the Enlist label. The Roundup business for Bayer, that Roundup business contributes $300 million to margin for Bayer each year. Unfortunately, they're spending $2 billion on legal fees and several more billion on settlements. That's not a very good business model. The question that we've got to ask is, how long are we going to have access to Roundup? I don't know the answer to that question, but what I do know is it's becoming more and more critical that we as farmers start speaking into these issues. So I oftentimes get the question of, think about the next decade. What's the biggest challenge or the biggest opportunity within the seed industry or within agriculture? And so what I would submit to you is the ability for us to navigate this regulatory environment over the next decade. That's one of the biggest challenges, one of the biggest opportunities, and I would say it's really a responsibility that each of us need to carry with more conviction. So my first job after I graduated from Purdue, I took a football coaching job down at Duke University in Durham, North Carolina. I got to work for a head coach by the name of David Cutcliffe, and he's kind of known as a quarterback whisperer. So while I was there at Duke, we got to work alongside a guy by the name of Daniel Jones. He's the quarterback for the New York Giants today. But really, Coach Cut was more well-known for coaching Eli Manning and Peyton Manning in college. So he's got a track record of significant success in the college coaching ranks, and he taught me quite a bit on the field, but really, he was also very instrumental in educating folks off the field. And one of the things that Coach Cut would say, he'd say, every meaningful action is preceded by conviction. And so when I think about the state of our regulatory environment today, I'm more convicted and convinced than ever that we've got to start speaking up to preserve our access to the tools and technologies that we need within our operations. So I'm going to give each of you a chance to do that today. So currently today, the EPA is drafting their strategy of how to further comply with the Endangered Species Act. You go back 50 years to the early 1970s, and that was when the Endangered Species Act and the FIFRA Act, the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act, were put into place. And those two laws were really supposed to be very limited, narrow in scope, and they were supposed to target unreasonable and burdensome activity. Fast forward to today, and the EPA is simply, they're tired of being sued. They're facing lawsuits left and right, and so they're trying to find ways to mitigate the risk of them being sued. And so their draft strategy that I've seen of how they would further comply with the Endangered Species Act is really troubling. It's talking about things like, farmers earning a certain number of negative points for doing certain farming activities, and then they have to take risk mitigating steps to offset those points. And all of this has to be tracked and submitted to the government. And as we think about the future of agriculture, we often have the conversation of what's going to happen to number of farms. How much is farm consolidation going to occur? And what I believe is the number one catalyst for farm consolidation in the next decade or two is going to be government compliance. I know a lot of farmers that aren't particularly interested in hiring a compliance officer to be able to report to the government what they're doing. So if you take a look at the screen here, this is a QR code. What this QR code will do is if you pull your phone out, open the camera and scan the QR code, this is going to take you directly to a link where you can submit a couple comments to the EPA. Doesn't have to be much, but sometimes just a simple comment from a grower to the EPA makes a world of difference. Some of the things that we at Beck's have talked about in our conversations with the EPA is pretty simple. Growers need choices. We do not need to be moving into a monopolistic type of agriculture environment. We need growers to have choices and the ability to choose the technology that works for their operation. And then just simply stating that the scope and the extent of the application of these two laws from 50 years ago has extended well beyond the original intent, and we need to get back to what it was originally intended for. And then honestly, just the last thing is, those laws, they were intended to prevent burdensome and unreasonable activity from taking place. And we're moving into a place now where the compliance that's going to be required, that is what's burdensome and unreasonable. And so I would encourage each of you to scan the QR code, just submit a sentence or two about what it means to you to maintain access to choices of product, and talk about, let's get back to the original scope and the intent of these couple laws. And I'll leave you with this, that everybody in the room here today is making a difference, okay? Whether you choose to make your voice heard on these issues or you choose not to, that is a choice, and it ultimately makes a difference, because I can promise you the folks that are on the other side of this issue that are trying to strip tools and access to product away from you, they're not staying silent. They're speaking into these issues, and I think it's time that all of us do the same thing. Now, speaking of making a difference, another aspect of our business where we're trying to make a difference is through our digital experience. Dad, why don't you talk about that?
Yeah. So before we jump right into that, I just want to take a moment to look at our business model and how we see ourselves and how we see you. We call this our A-frame business model. If you think of it as a house, any structure we build needs to start with a solid foundation. And we talk about that our cornerstones are our desire and work to honor God in what we do. In fact, we won't remain unstoppable together without Him, without His blessing. And then on the other side of that, having a heart and mind to help others. And we live that out through our attitudes and actions. But the point of what we're doing is you as farmers. And right at the peak, we talk about our purpose in helping farmers succeed. And one of the ways that we do that, we've alluded to with our diverse product access and having those choices for you to make that choice on the recommendations that we have about which genetics and traits that are most profitable for you. And on the other side is what we call exceptional brand experience. That's really how we show up each day and how we interact among ourselves and with you. And so as we talk about the digital side, our relationship with farmers, we want to remain personal. And we can use digital and technology to enhance that relationship. Ryan Parkins, our director of sales, and Ryan shared with our dealer team a few weeks ago at our summer camp that our goal that human beings will still play the most important role in our relationship with farmers, while technology will play an increasing role. And our goal with technology is really to enhance our human interaction and to make our work more impactful. And there's a tool that we created several years ago that we call Farm Server. And Farm Server is that platform where you as a farmer can collect, safely store your information, and then utilize that information for decision making. And I believe the whole point of this message is that in the future, I believe we're going to be required or utilizing digital information more in whether it's compliance or with some of the things I want to share with you about how we can communicate to help you improve your operation. So if you become a Beck customer, you automatically get this tool, a Farm Server, for free. And so it's relatively easy to sign up. In fact, we've got our Farm Server team here today that they can help you get signed up. Again, the account is free. And one of the ways that you can utilize this is to understand the growth stage that each field is at. And so you become a Beck customer, sign up for Farm Server, and when you map out your field, once you plant that field, you tell it the planting date and the relative maturity of the product you planted, and it goes to work. In fact, it will give you the season-long prediction of when that field's going to emerge, when it's going to reach different growth stages, and I'll point out the R3 growth stage because that's when, in soybeans, Farm Server would send you a text message saying that you might consider applying a fungicide on this particular field in the near future because the R3 growth stage has shown that that's the time to apply it for the best return on investment. Another tool that's within Farm Server is called Ready to Plant. And the way this works is I'll just walk through an example of our own this spring. Myself and our family farms a few acres just south of here personally, and got a text message this spring, and it said, hey, your field looks like it's going to be ready to plant on such and such day. And so I think that was on a Saturday. So I went and looked at the field, and it wasn't right. I could tell that I was going to need at least another half a day to maybe a day before that ground conditions were going to be right. So what I promise you is that Ready to Plant will not always be exactly right, but I can also promise you that if you sign up for it and it sends you messages, you just might get some insight that helps you to plant maybe ahead of when you were thinking would be the right planting date. But most of us know that earlier planting almost always leads to higher yields. And so that's the way Ready to Plant works. Now, it also works on the backside. Now, anybody in the room guilty of planting and things are going great, and you get weather report and it's supposed to rain tomorrow and be kind of cold and damp. How many of you keep planting and you go ahead and finish that field knowing that you're probably going to have to replant? Anybody guilty of that? I think we all are. So what Ready to Plant will do is it will give you a little bit of a warning. It'll send you a message that says, you might consider pressing pause because the weather forecast doesn't look good. And maybe you stop planting a day ahead of that rainstorm. Artificial intelligence, that's something that's been around for years, but there has been so much more investment and companies working in this area that it is changing our world, and it's changing it rapidly. And there's a book out called Co-Intelligence, and I'm going to use a few quotes out of that book to kind of talk about what artificial intelligence is and what it isn't. One of the quotes is an analogy. It said, power tools didn't eliminate carpenters, but it made them more efficient. Y'all agree with that? Power tools didn't eliminate carpenters, just made them more efficient. And that's a little bit of the way that AI can work. It's not going to eliminate every job, and we hope it doesn't, but it can make some things, some mundane tasks, more efficient. And it can also be pretty creative. So let's say, for example, that you needed a farm rental contract. You wanted to lease your farm, or you wanted to lease a farm from a landowner nearby. You could ask an app called ChatGPT, which is an artificial intelligence type of application. You could ask it to give you a sample of a farm rental agreement. And within seconds, you would have that. Now, the last point I'm going to make is the most important point. And that is that AI doesn't actually know anything. It just, when you ask it a question, it goes out and looks at the world of information that it has access to, and it predicts the next word in the sentence based on that question you ask. So it doesn't know whether something's true or not true. So before you take that sample cash rent agreement and share it with your neighbor, you might want to read it first. You might want to make sure that the things that it says are what you want to say in that agreement. Well, we're developing, we're really just on the beginning stages of developing a tool that we could use within Farm Server. We're calling it AI Agent. And I was playing around with it the other day, and I asked it this question. What does Beck's practical farm research say about fungicide application on soybeans? And within seconds, it gave me this answer. It said that the R3 growth stage is the most optimal time to maximize your return on investment. It showed yields for different products that we tested. And at the bottom, it gave me a lot more data if I was interested in digging a little bit deeper. And so what about future conversations? I mean, what if you were a FarmServer customer and you had your farm's data in FarmServer? And you ask it this question: what are the 5 best corn hybrids for highest yields on my farm? You think that type of an answer could be helpful? I wouldn't let it decide everything, but I think it could give you some insights into some products that maybe you weren't using that might be beneficial. Or another question, taking more of the financial matter into account. What practices and hybrids would provide the best return on investment? So then you'd have to know what's the price of seed, what's commodity price you're going to sell at, what are PFR proven practices that you might use, and then it would give you a recommendation on all of that, including the best hybrids. So those are some things that we're looking at. And as I said before, FarmServer is a tool, and whether in the future farmers have to utilize data in a technical electronic form in order to be able to do the things you want to do from a regulatory standpoint, FarmServer could be a tool where you capture that information. Or whether it's just getting more information to you through FarmServer that can help you in making decisions. And whatever that is, we encourage you to take the next step and get that information. Well, at any point in the talk, there's always a low point, right? And so I'm going to turn it over to Corey, and he's going to cover market prices.
All right, low point's over. It's no secret. Everybody in the room knows where commodity prices are at. We're likely headed into a tighter economic period and lower, more compressed margins. But, at Beck's, we like to talk about being the best value per dollar spent. And that statement, it's not simply true because you get more through your experience with Beck's. It is a true statement. You get more value through your experience with Beck's than what any other seed brand can provide. You think about practical farm research, commitment rewards, FarmServer, you name it. What we're able to provide through the Beck's experience is the best value per dollar spent. But the reason why that statement becomes more true during tougher economic periods is because at Beck's, ultimately what we do is we provide more of what matters the most. And that's more yield and it's more working capital. So now the question is, where do those things come from? When we think about more yield, really that comes from something that my dad mentioned a few minutes ago, and that's diverse product access. So what we're able to do is to source the leading traits and genetics from all of the major trait and genetic providers in the industry so that we can have genetically diverse, high-performing products through a single relationship. The average farmer plants about 2.5 brands, and the reason why that is because they're looking to spread out their risk. They're looking to have access to genetically diverse products and diverse traits. And what we're able to provide at Beck's is all of that risk mitigation, all of that diversity of trait and genetic access through a single relationship. And ultimately, that contributes to more yield. Now, something else that contributes to more yield, our Escalate seed treatment package. You think about our Escalate package, comes standard on corn, soybeans, and wheat. 14 modes of action in our standard package on corn. That's an industry-leading number. We've actually done some studies here recently over the last 3 years in 193 locations that demonstrate early season emergence and stand counts. So what we've found is that on average, Beck's has 816 more plants standing at emergence than the competitive average. And so what you find there is we believe that is coming through the Escalate advantage. That early season health ultimately contributes to more yield late in the year as well. Flipping over to soybeans, again, an industry-leading number for a standard soybean treatment package with 10 modes of action. And then something that we're really excited this year if you're in an area that deals with heavy soybean cyst nematode pressure or sudden death syndrome, what we're bringing into the mix in our upgraded package this year with Saltro and Chitosan really makes a difference. In the past, we've offered Ilevo, and so what we're able to move to now with Saltro and Chitosan is improved soybean cyst nematode control without the halo effect. So we're really excited about what that's going to do in those tougher soybean cyst nematode or sudden death syndrome areas. I also mentioned more working capital. So where does that come from? Well, the first place that you ought to look is through Commit Rewards. And really what Commit Rewards does is it provides access to more buying power, interest savings. We all know where interest rates are at today compared to 2 years ago, and balance sheet improvements. So when you're able to have access to a piece of equipment that you can then put on your balance sheet through your seed purchase, what you're ultimately doing is improving the operational and financial health of your business. Now, how does Commit Rewards work? I'm going to walk through a couple examples here, and I'm going to start with a level 2, a 3-year, multi-year agreement. And this is about a 400-acre customer spending $40,000 a year to purchase seed. So this particular customer would earn 25 points. And we're going to make it a really easy example. So he earns 25 points. He's going to spend all 25 points on a pressure washer and a generator. So how does the math work? Well, let's start with the non-Beck's customer. First off, the non-Beck's customer is going to have to spend over $12,000 to go buy those 2 pieces of equipment. And then you factor in 7% interest, which is really probably a pretty conservative amount right now. That adds another almost $2,000 of expense. And so ultimately, that non-Beck's customer's got to spend over $14,000 of cash in order to add those 2 pieces of equipment to his operation. Now, the Beck's customer, because he's in a 3-year, multi-year agreement, and he earns 25 points, first of all, you recognize the buying power advantage. Right off the bat, we're able to access those 2 pieces of equipment for a little over $9,000 compared to $12,000. And ultimately, those 25 points that customer is earning, that covers the bill of the access to those pieces of equipment. So what this Beck's customer is having to spend is $1 a year for each item, 2 items, 3 years, that's $6. Everything else, those pieces of equipment are earned through his seed purchase, through his multi-year agreement commitment. And so you can see that the customer advantage for the Beck's customer in working capital is over $14,000. That's $26 a unit on corn, it's $12 a unit on soybeans each of the 3 years. Now you might ask, what about a larger farmer, larger customer farming 3,000 acres? Spending, in this particular example, would be about $300,000 a year in a multi-year agreement. How does the math work on that? Well, the example here is a customer who wants a Ford truck and a John Deere Gator, and that in itself would cost 235 points. The customer earns 235 points, but to access those 2 pieces of equipment would actually cost 268 points. So there's 33 additional points. And this is where, through our partnership with First Mid, we're able to come alongside you and we're able to support the buy-up program. So you didn't quite earn enough points to get both pieces of equipment through your seed purchase alone, but what we can do is offer a buy-up so you can buy those extra 33 points at 0% interest and still get both items in your operation. So let's walk through the math here. Again, starting with the non-Beck's customer, what you find is that non-Beck's customer would have to spend $113,000 to get those 2 pieces of equipment, and then put 10% down, so $12,000 cash expense right away. And ultimately, you're going to need to finance $101,000. At 7% interest, that's almost $15,000 of interest expense over the 3 years. You run all the math down, and what you find is that non-Beck's customer, to get a Ford truck and a John Deere Gator, is going to have to spend $128,000 of cash. Now, in the case of the Beck's customer, right off the bat, you've got a buying power advantage, right? $100,000 is our cost on those 2 pieces of equipment compared to $113,000. And remember, I said this customer didn't earn quite enough points to be able to get both seamlessly for just $1 a year through his seed purchase. What he did earn in terms of points was worth $88,000. And so what he's left with then is $12,000 is the remaining buy-up that this customer is going to have to spend over the course of the 3 years in order to buy up those 33 points that he needed to get those 2 pieces of equipment within his operation. That $12,000 is at 0% interest through our partnership with First Mid Bank out of Illinois. And so ultimately what you come down to is $128,000 of expense for the non-Beck's customer, $12,000 of expense for the Beck's customer. That's $115,000 working capital advantage for the Beck's customer. It's $31 a unit on corn, it's $11 a unit on soybeans each of the 3 years. That's the value. And so ultimately what we come to is simply Commit Rewards is a financial tool that Beck's customers have access to and can take advantage of that non-Beck's customers just simply can't take advantage of that tool. Now, how about some other working capital strategies? How can we continue to pursue maybe some small, subtle changes that can improve your financial health as the ag economy tightens? And so one of those things is just your cash management strategy. I'm going to go back to a football example because I'm a football guy and I can't really help myself, okay? But when you think about football, there's really 3 phases of the game. There's offense, there's defense, there's special teams. And most people would say that it's offense and defense that wins or lose you games. But special teams does play an important role. They can make a difference. I coached with a guy who used to say, you know, I don't need my offense or my defense to win me or lose me games, certainly. I just need them to be mistake-free and opportunistic. And that's really how I see your cash management strategy playing out. It's making small changes that where you can be optimistic and avoid making a mistake. So an example, I think everybody in the room here would love to save an extra $10 a unit on corn and $2 a unit on soybeans. Well, if you're somebody who's paid your seed bill in February, that's a 10% cash discount window. If you went and talked to your banker and said, look, you know, Beck's actually offers 14% cash discount in January. Could I tap into my line of credit just 30 days sooner? I know I'm going to have to pay a little bit more interest over that 30 days, but I can get a 4% cash discount advantage by paying in January. That 4% is worth more than $10 a bag on corn, and it's worth over $2 a bag on soybeans. So just a small conversation that you have with your banker, you know, that's a conversation that, frankly, your banker wants to have with you. They want to find ways where you can protect your operation and put your farm in a better place financially. So that's just one example of a small change that you can make in your operation to improve your financial health. Another thing goes back to diverse product access that I mentioned earlier. You know, and I said that the average farmer is planting 2.5 brands in order to spread out their risk, in order to get diverse genetics and diverse traits. Well, because you're able to access all of that risk mitigation through our diverse product access, why don't you just become President's Club customer? President's Club customer that commits 100% of their business to Beck's, that gives you another $6 a unit on corn and another $1 a unit on soybeans. If you're after genetic diversity and trait diversity, you've got everything that you're looking for right here in a single relationship. And so you can take that $10 bill and make it 16 on corn. You can take the $2 bill and make it 3 on soybeans. So there's just a couple examples of some small decisions that you can make within your operation to improve your financial health, even as commodity prices are low and margins are compressed. Now, as we wrap up the talk here, I'm going to kick it back to my dad, and he's going to finish this up.
Thanks, Corey. So our Unstoppable Together theme really takes us back to the beginning, and that's really where I want to go because, you know, as a farming community, we do face challenges, and we also have opportunities. And as we think about, you know, my experience, what it was like to put that mask on and go below the surface and see things I hadn't seen before, I want you to think about these next 5 things that I'm going to share with you that are decisions that probably every one of you could make. Some of you may have already made some of these decisions. But let's start off where we went to the bottom, right? The low point in the talk was commodity prices. Well, here's something that I think we can all do, and sometimes we need help. We may need an advisor or something to help keep us on track. But what if, as farmers, we knew our cost of production, and then whenever market prices were above that cost of production, we'd sell a little bit. And then as those prices went up, we'd sell a little bit more. And as the prices started to go down, we'd sell a little bit more. But every time we sold, we were making money. I think that's a much less stressful strategy than waiting and waiting for it to go up and thinking, okay, corn's going to get back to $6 or beans are going to make it back to 13 or 14, whatever. I think that can be a very successful strategy to help keep your operation, keep all of us unstoppable when we know we're selling in the money. The second point, I just go to what Corey talked about. As a Beck's customer, there are ways that you can maximize your opportunity to save on cash, to get additional discounts, to do things that help you to actually pay less this year for seed than you did last year. Thirdly, if you're a Beck's customer, you automatically qualify for a free farm server account. So why not get set up today? Why not get set up to help prepare your farming operation for some of the compliance and regulatory challenges that I believe we're going to be faced with to have to do. At some point, I believe we're going to have to provide our farm's data electronically to the government or some regulatory agency in order to comply with what we're doing. And then fourth, send comments to EPA. I showed that picture of the farm, and then we talked about the billions of people in the world, right? 6.5 or 7 billion people in the world. That's a lot of people eating, so that's pretty good job security. But the challenge we face is that as farmers, we're only less than 2% of that population. And those officials that we've elected and those people that work in their offices don't always know about us, and they don't always know how important the tools are, the pesticides, the traits, the different genetics that we need to keep our farms viable. And so we got to speak up. If we want to keep these things, we got to let them know so they understand. And when they're making legislation, they've got us in their mind. And then finally, we'll go back to the invitation box we sent you, and we said, if there's one thing, one idea that you could take home today that's a PFR-proven practice that helps your farm, that'd be worth our effort, and that would help us to keep us unstoppable. Yesterday on the tours, I want to share one of these things that came out of the tour, and it's really simple. How many of you recognize the importance of tire pressure? Most of you probably think about it in this way. You want to make sure your tires are fully inflated, right? Around 35 pounds before you go to the field. Well, what our team's discovered over the last 2 years is that if we take 7 pounds out of that tire, we gain, on average, 1.5 bushels on beans and 1.5 bushels to up to 4 bushels on corn, just by reducing our tire pressure. So I throw that in as free. There's a lot of other things for you to capture today and think about that you can use to put that one idea out there. Because really it's how we collectively work. It's individuals like you taking that next step that help us as a farming community to remain unstoppable together. Thanks for being here, and enjoy lunch if you haven't got lunch yet.